The year was 1944, and across Europe, millions were trapped in the grip of famine, particularly in war-torn regions such as the Netherlands, Poland, and Greece. The horrors of the Nazi occupation, scorched earth military strategies, and destroyed farmlands resulted in food shortages that led to the deaths of civilians by the tens of thousands. The U.S. government, concerned with how to manage the inevitable post-war hunger crisis, turned to its scientific community for solutions. The question was not only how to stop starvation, but how to rehabilitate those who had been subjected to it for prolonged periods. Prior to this study, little was known about how starvation impacted the human mind and body in the long term, and even less was understood about the delicate process of refeeding. Ansel Keys, a pioneering physiologist known for his work on diet and health, took the helm of what would become one of the most ethically debated experiments in psychological history. The U.S. military had a significant challenge. How could they ethically simulate the effects of starvation? The recruitment of participants was an essential step, and it wasn't as difficult as one might imagine. World War II saw the rise of conscientious objectors, men who, for reasons of personal faith or morality, refused to fight. Many of these men were members of pacifist groups, such as the Quakers and Mennonites, who viewed this study as an opportunity to serve humanity without violating their beliefs. They were often treated. In this initial phase of the study, it was crucial for the researchers to gather as much data as possible about the participants' physical and psychological health. Ansel Keys and his team were meticulous in their approach, collecting detailed information about the men's metabolic rates, body composition, and organ function. They measured everything from the size of their hearts to the speed of their reflexes, aiming to establish a comprehensive baseline against which the effects of starvation could later be measured. Psychologically, they conducted thorough interviews and personality assessments, gauging the men's emotional resilience, cognitive functions, and social interactions. This wealth of pre-experiment data would later provide some of the most groundbreaking insights into how the mind and body deteriorate under starvation. At this point, the men were in good spirits, unaware of the true extent of the trials that lay ahead. The transition into semi-starvation was gradual but brutal. By February 1945, as the participants' caloric intake was halved, the effects became immediately apparent. The meals, monotonous in their simplicity, mirrored the diets of those in famine-stricken Europe, primarily bread, potatoes, and turnips. Historically, these were the exact foods rationed out in occupied territories where civilians were living on as little as 800 to 1,000 calories per day. The men's physical decline was stark. They lost weight rapidly, and their energy levels plummeted. This was not just a simple reduction in physical capability. The experiment forced them to engage in physical activities that became increasingly torturous. The distance they were expected to walk weekly, 22 miles, was a direct reflection of the grueling marches civilians were subjected to during wartime as they fled cities under siege or sought scarce food sources. Over time, walking became nearly impossible, and this only intensified their fixation on food, an obsession that would later dominate their lives. By the third month, the obsession with food had become the men's sole mental focus. This was not unique to the participants of the study. History shows that those who endure prolonged hunger often become consumed by thoughts of eating. In diaries from the Dutch hunger winter, a famine that claimed the lives of 20,000 people, survivors wrote about dreams filled with feasts, much like how the men in this experiment began hoarding cookbooks. The phenomenon of food fixation has been documented in various cultures during periods of famine, from Ireland's Great Famine in the 1840s to the Siege of Leningrad in World War II. Food ceased to be about nourishment. It became an all-consuming obsession, eclipsing any other pleasures or desires in life. The men lost interest in everything else: love, laughter, and even social connections. Romantic relationships felt trivial in comparison to the gnawing hunger, and humor lost its appeal. In this state, food symbolized survival, and every bite was savored with the intensity of someone teetering on the edge of life and death. The mental toll of the experiment soon became too much for many of the participants. Their inability to control their eating impulses reflected a condition known as starvation neurosis. This term, coined by the researchers, encapsulated the psychological disintegration experienced by those who were food-deprived for prolonged periods. The actions of some men, shoplifting food or binging uncontrollably, mirrored the behaviors observed in famine survivors from the war. Many Holocaust survivors, after being liberated from concentration camps, exhibited similar behaviors of binging on food, unable to restrain themselves after prolonged deprivation. For the participants, their breakdown was inevitable. This phase of the experiment starkly contrasted the scientific orderliness that characterized the initial stages. What began as a controlled study quickly unraveled into a human drama of desperation, one that mirrored the chaos and suffering of the very famine victims the study sought to help. The final stage of the experiment, the refeeding phase, was psychologically the most devastating. This was supposed to be the men's redemption, but instead, it became another trial. The men had been looking forward to this phase with the expectation of relief, yet the slow process of refeeding felt like another form of torture. Historically, this mirrors the mistakes made after the liberation of Nazi concentration camps, where well-meaning rescuers often gave survivors too much food too quickly, resulting in refeeding syndrome, a dangerous condition where the body, unable to process the sudden influx of calories, goes into shock. In this experiment, the slow pace of recovery was unbearable. The participants continued to lose weight, and their mental health plummeted further. The incident involving Sam Legg, where he inexplicably chopped off his own fingers, was a graphic representation of the psychological toll starvation took. His actions were not merely an act of madness, but a visceral response to the overwhelming stress of prolonged deprivation. It was as though, even in refeeding, the men could not escape the grip of starvation. Even after the experiment concluded, the men's suffering did not end. Binge eating, depression, and anxiety followed many of them for years. This long-term impact reflected the deep scars left by starvation, scars that were not easily healed by food alone. Yet, for the men who participated, their contributions went largely unrecognized. They received no compensation or honors for their sacrifice, and their psychological trauma went untreated. It was a grim reminder of the human cost of scientific progress, one that forced society to confront the ethical dilemmas of such experiments. In the end, the Minnesota Starvation Experiment left more questions than answers. Yes, it provided invaluable data that has since been used to inform treatments for eating disorders and starvation recovery, but it also raised profound ethical questions. Can the insights gained from such an experiment ever justify the extreme psychological distress inflicted on the participants? It's a dilemma that echoes throughout the history of psychological research, from the Milgram obedience study to the Stanford prison experiment. While the knowledge gained may save lives, the personal cost to those who participate in these trials can be devastating. The participants of this study, like so many before and after them, were left with deep emotional scars. Their story serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of human endurance and the ethical boundaries of scientific exploration. If you found this exploration into the creepy side of psychology fascinating, don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your take on these chilling experiments. And if you're new here or haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into the darkest corners of the human mind. Thank you for watching Crime and Psychology. Until next time, stay curious and a little creeped out.